Johnson, 22 years old at the time, felt his stomach twist the moment his mother said, "We already booked a family trip that weekend." He had called only to remind them about his college graduation, something he had fought for through sleepless nights and 2 exhausting part-time jobs. But instead of excitement, he heard the usual household chaos and his mother adding, "You're independent. You'll understand." Johnson sat silently, gripping his phone. "So you're skipping my graduation?" he asked. His mother sighed. "Don't be dramatic, honey. Brandon deserves a vacation." Johnson whispered, "So I don't deserve a graduation?" No one answered. A week later, the situation turned surreal. Johnson was studying for a brutal thermodynamics exam when his mother called again. "Sweetheart, I have a favor to ask," she began softly. Johnson already felt his jaw tighten. "What now?" She cleared her throat. "Since you're not doing anything for graduation, I am graduating," he cut in. She continued anyway. "Kate wants to relax on this trip, so maybe you could watch Brandon for the weekend. Kevin doesn't want to go, and it's only fair someone stays behind." Johnson actually laughed. "You want me to skip my own graduation to babysit?" Silence followed before she said, "Stop being selfish." When his father called the next night, Johnson hoped for at least a hint of reason. Instead he heard, "Your mother said you refused." "I'm disappointed." Johnson pressed his forehead against the wall. "Dad, you're asking me to miss one of the biggest days of my life." His father didn't hesitate. "It's just a ceremony. Help your sister. Be a man." Johnson swallowed hard. "I've been a man since I was 14. I worked jobs, paid for school, handled everything alone." His father snapped back, "Kate needs support." Johnson answered quietly, "So did I. You just never noticed." The line went dead. Graduation day arrived with clear skies and a quiet peace Johnson hadn't expected. His girlfriend squeezed his hand and whispered, "You earned this." His 2 closest friends cheered loudly when his name echoed through the auditorium. 3 professors hugged him afterward, telling him, "We're proud of you, Johnson." It felt like oxygen. Later at dinner, his girlfriend asked gently, "Do you miss them?" Johnson paused, cutting into his food slowly. "I miss what family should have been," he said. "But I don't miss people who chose a cruise over me." His friends nodded, raising glasses. For once, Johnson felt he belonged somewhere. 2 weeks later, Johnson stepped into his first real job, junior project coordinator at a manufacturing firm. His manager greeted him with a firm handshake. "We're excited to have you." Johnson smiled, feeling something new settle in his chest. Stability. He worked long hours, learned quickly, and quietly rose through the ranks. At night, he sometimes wondered if his family even realized he'd graduated. They never called. Never texted. Never emailed. One evening, his girlfriend found him staring at an old photo. "Still thinking about them?" she asked. Johnson shook his head. "Not thinking. Just remembering why I moved forward without them." By the end of his first year at the company, Johnson had already streamlined 3 major processes that saved the firm thousands of dollars. His manager called him into the office one afternoon and said, "You're doing incredible work. Keep this up." Johnson nodded, surprised by the recognition. Nobody in his childhood home ever praised effort. They only demanded more. That night, his girlfriend cooked dinner and joked, "Look at you, Mr. Important." Johnson laughed, shaking his head. "I'm just trying to prove I belong here." She touched his arm gently. "You already do. You just needed the right people to see it." A year later, Johnson earned his first promotion. Project coordinator. Bigger responsibilities, better pay, and a team that respected him. His manager congratulated him in front of the whole department. "Johnson will be leading small projects now. He's earned it." The applause felt unreal. At home, his girlfriend hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. They celebrated with takeout on the couch, laughing about how far he'd come. Later that night she asked, "Do you ever think about telling your family?" Johnson exhaled slowly. "Tell them what? That I succeeded without them? They wouldn't care unless they needed something." Life kept moving and Johnson kept climbing. He started managing larger projects, working with engineers, vendors, and clients. People trusted his judgment. One afternoon, during a meeting, a senior engineer said, "If Johnson signs off, I'm good with it." Hearing that stunned him. Someone valuing his voice was still a foreign language. After work, he told his girlfriend, "Sometimes I still expect someone to say I don't belong here." She looked at him with soft eyes. "That's not your truth anymore. You built this life." Johnson nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "Yeah," he said. "For the first time I believe that." 2 years later came another huge step: senior project coordinator. A raise, an office upgrade, and more travel opportunities. Johnson threw himself into the work, mastering every challenge. During a company dinner, his director clinked a glass and said, "Johnson is a perfect example of resilience and discipline." Johnson smiled politely, but inside he remembered years of doing laundry alone at 13 and working double shifts to afford textbooks. Later at home, his girlfriend teased him, "You're glowing." He chuckled. "I'm exhausted." She curled beside him and whispered, "You're building something real." Johnson leaned back thinking, "Yeah, something they never gave me." Around this time, Johnson met Amy, an accountant whose firm shared their building. Their first real conversation happened when she bought him coffee after noticing his rough morning. "You look like you fought a printer today," she joked. Johnson laughed louder than expected. They began talking regularly: coffee breaks, elevator chats, lunchtime walks. One afternoon she smiled and said, "You know, you're easy to talk to." Johnson blinked, and used to such warmth. "I don't hear that often." Amy shrugged playfully. "Well, get used to it." By the time they exchanged numbers, Johnson felt something he hadn't felt in years: uncomplicated hope. Johnson and Amy began dating a few months later. Their connection felt easy, natural in a way he didn't expect. One evening, after a simple dinner, she asked, "Why do you look surprised when people care about you?" Johnson hesitated. "I guess I didn't grow up around that." Amy touched his hand gently. "Well, you're with me now. Get used to being appreciated." Johnson smiled weakly, still adjusting to the idea. As they washed dishes side by side, she nudged him playfully. "You're allowed to have good things, you know." Johnson nodded. "I'm trying to believe that more each day." Their relationship deepened quickly. Amy invited him to her family's Sunday dinners, a tradition filled with loud chatter and warm laughter. Her father would ask, "How's work treating you, son?" while her mother insisted he take leftovers home. Johnson felt awkward at first, sitting among a family that actually enjoyed each other, but Amy whispered, "Relax. They already like you." One evening, after her little brother hugged him goodbye, Johnson said quietly, "Your family is incredible." Amy smiled. "They think the same about you." He swallowed, feeling a strange ache. "This is what I thought family was supposed to be." Work continued to evolve for Johnson. By his 3rd year he was promoted again, senior project manager. His director told him, "You've earned every bit of this." Johnson thanked him, stunned by how far he'd come. That night, Amy cooked his favorite meal and said, "I knew this was coming." Johnson chuckled. "You have too much faith in me." She raised an eyebrow. "No such thing." As they ate, Amy asked gently, "Do you want to tell your family?" Johnson shook his head. "If they didn't care about my graduation, they won't care about this." Amy sighed. "Then let's celebrate without them." A year later, Johnson proposed during a quiet hike. No fireworks, no crowd, just him, Amy, and a simple question he'd rehearsed 20 times. She burst into tears before he even finished. "Of course I'll marry you," she said, laughing as she hugged him. Her family threw them an engagement party filled with music, speeches, and happy tears. Her father pulled Johnson aside afterward. "You're a good man. We're glad she found you." Johnson held on to those words, feeling them settle deep in his chest. Later that night, Amy whispered, "You're part of this family now." Johnson realized he finally believed it. Their wedding was small. 50 people, all from Amy's side and close friends from work. Not a single message came from Johnson's biological family, but he didn't flinch. When he stood at the altar and watched Amy walk toward him, nothing else mattered. During the reception, her mother hugged him tightly and said, "Welcome home, sweetheart." For a moment, Johnson felt something break open inside him, something he hadn't let himself feel since childhood. Amy noticed and asked, "You okay?" Johnson nodded, wiping his eyes. "Yeah. For the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Married life settled into a warm rhythm. Johnson continued excelling at work, managing multimillion-dollar projects across different states. His team respected him deeply, often saying, If Johnson approves it, we're good. He mentored younger employees, remembering what it felt like to be the overlooked one. At home, he and Amy built small rituals. Friday night movies, Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks with their golden retriever, Cooper. One night as they sat on the porch, Amy said, "You know, you've built a life you should be proud of." Johnson leaned back, watching the stars. "Yeah," he whispered. "I truly have." By year 7, a competitor company approached Johnson with an offer he couldn't ignore. An international project portfolio, a major salary jump, and more leadership freedom. When he told Amy, she grinned. "You deserve every bit of this." He accepted the job, stepping into a role that challenged him in new ways. He traveled to Singapore, Germany, and Brazil, learning cultures and managing global teams. Every time he returned, Amy waited at the airport with open arms. One evening she asked, "Do you ever wish your family could see this?" Johnson paused. "Maybe once. But they made their choice. And so did I." Around year 8, Johnson and Amy bought a house. A warm 3-bedroom with a big yard and a bright kitchen. As he slid the key into the front door for the first time, Johnson closed his eyes. "This is ours," he whispered. Amy hugged him from behind. "We built this together." Her family helped them move in. Her brothers carried furniture while her mother organized the pantry. After everything was set, they all ate pizza on the living room floor. Amy's dad patted Johnson's shoulder. "Proud of you, son." Johnson swallowed hard, whispering back, "Thank you." It felt like healing. Life grew peaceful. Johnson and Amy adopted Cooper, a golden retriever with too much energy and not enough awareness of his own size. They hosted friends for dinners, traveled when work allowed, and enjoyed a life free from chaos. One night, Amy asked softly, "Do you think you'll ever talk to your family again?" Johnson stared at Cooper chewing loudly on a toy. "Maybe if they'd ever apologized," he said. "But they reached out only when they wanted something." "That's not family." Amy nodded. "Then you protect your peace." Johnson leaned against her. "That's the plan," he whispered. 10 years after graduation, Johnson barely thought about his past anymore, until an email arrived from Kate with the subject line, "Important family matter." He almost deleted it, but curiosity won. The message rambled, filled with typos, but the point was clear. Their parents were sick, struggling financially, and needed help. Kate wrote, "You've always been the successful one. Please step up." Johnson stared at the screen, stunned by the sudden urgency after a decade of silence. Amy walked in and asked, "Everything okay?" Johnson exhaled slowly. "Depends on how you define okay," he said, turning the laptop toward her. Amy read the email slowly, her eyebrows lifting. "So, after 10 years now they remember you?" Johnson let out a dry laugh. "Only because they need something." Kate had written about their father's early onset Parkinson's, their mother's severe arthritis, and the rising medical bills. She mentioned Kevin was between jobs, and Brandon was difficult, carefully avoiding any responsibility. Amy touched Johnson's shoulder. "What are you thinking?" He shook his head. "I'm thinking they didn't email for my wedding, my promotions, anything. But now that they're desperate, suddenly I'm family again." Amy whispered, "You don't owe them your life." He let the email sit for a week. Every time he opened his laptop, he saw the unread message count, but he refused to rush. One night, Amy asked gently, "Are you going to reply?" Johnson nodded slowly. "Yes. But they're not going to like what I say." He typed carefully, choosing each word with precision. "Kate, thanks for reaching out after a decade of silence. Unfortunately, I can't help. You all made it clear years ago that I was selfish. Since I'm so selfish, depending on me wouldn't be fair to Mom and Dad." Amy leaned over his shoulder, whispering, "That's honest." Johnson continued writing. "When you asked me to skip my graduation to babysit, you said family helps each other. That rule only applied when you needed something. I built a life without you and I intend to keep living it. I hope you find a solution, but it won't involve me. Please don't contact me again unless it's an obituary notice." Amy read the message twice before whispering, "Are you sure?" Johnson nodded. "If they didn't care when I worked myself to the bone for that degree, they don't get to care now." He hit send. Felt like exhaling a decade. But silence didn't last. A few days later, another email arrived, this time to Johnson's work address. Amy saw his eyes widen. "Seriously?" He opened it. Kate had written again, this time more frantic. Dad is getting worse. Mom can't keep up. We need money, Johnson. Even $1,000 a month would help. She added guilt-laced lines like, they're your parents, and you'll regret this someday. Johnson sighed deeply. She really thinks throwing guilt at me will change anything. Amy crossed her arms. Forward it to IT. Block her. Johnson nodded. Already ahead of you. And that was that. For a while things quieted down again until Kevin found him on LinkedIn. His message was short and furious. You're a selfish jerk. Step up and be a man. Mom and Dad need you. Johnson almost laughed at the irony. Kevin, 28 and still living in their parents' basement, telling him to be a man. Amy read the message over Johnson's shoulder and muttered, the audacity. Johnson blocked Kevin without replying. It's wild, he said softly. They ignored me for 10 years, but somehow I'm the solution to everything. Amy hugged him from behind. Because you're the only functional one. Months later, Johnson received an unexpected message from his cousin Josh, a name he hadn't seen in years. Hey, can we talk? Josh asked. Curious, Johnson agreed. During the call, Josh said, I've been hearing stories, and I finally learned the truth. He explained how Kate had been painting herself as the devoted daughter caring for their sick parents, while claiming Johnson had abandoned them heartlessly. But during a visit, Josh discovered Kate barely helped at all. She's living there rent-free doing nothing, he said. And Kevin, well, Kevin is Kevin. Johnson rubbed his forehead. So nothing changed, huh? Josh continued. Your parents also told everyone they can't afford proper care because you refused to help. Johnson let out a slow exhale. They never helped me through college. I worked 2 jobs and lived off ramen. Josh sighed. I know now. I'm sorry I believed them. Johnson shrugged gently. You didn't know the truth. Josh paused. Do you want the family to know what really happened? Johnson leaned back. Tell them if you want. I'm not hiding anything. Josh said, good. They need to hear it. For the first time in years, Johnson felt the weight shifting off him. A week later, the fallout began. Extended family members emailed Johnson, apologizing for believing lies. An aunt wrote, we didn't know what they did to you. Another said, we offered help but withdrew after learning the truth. Amy watched Johnson read the messages with a calm expression. How do you feel? She asked. Johnson shrugged lightly. Strangely neutral. I don't hate them. I just don't trust them. Amy nodded. That's fair. Meanwhile, Josh updated him periodically, sharing how some aunts confronted Kate directly. She's furious, he reported. Johnson only replied, she'll live. Then came the final attempt. Johnson's Aunt Linda called. She'd always been the gentlest in the family. Honey, your parents are struggling, she said softly. They've made mistakes, but maybe you could talk to them. Johnson asked one question. Did they apologize? Silence stretched. Well, they didn't say the words exactly, but I know they feel it. Johnson replied, if they can say everything else, they can say, sorry. Until then, there's nothing to talk about. Aunt Linda pushed again, but Johnson stayed firm. They reached out only when they wanted something. I'm done being their backup plan. 2 years passed quietly after that. Johnson heard through relatives that his parents sold their house and moved into a small apartment. Kate and Brandon moved in with them, crowding the space. Kevin eventually got a call center job but stayed in the basement. The chaos they created finally closed in on them. One evening, Amy asked, do you ever wonder what life would have been like if they'd treated you right? Johnson looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe I'd still be trying to earn love from people who never planned to give it. I'm grateful for the life we built instead. Johnson rarely thought about his family anymore, but sometimes small things reminded him. A father helping his child at the store. A mother cheering at a school event. Those little moments made him quietly wonder what childhood could have been if someone had shown up for him. One night, while he and Amy walked Cooper around the neighborhood, she asked, do you feel angry when you think about them? Johnson shook his head. Not angry. Just distant. Amy squeezed his hand. Distance can be protection. Johnson nodded. It is. And it's the only reason I didn't end up repeating their mistakes. One afternoon, while working from home, Johnson received another unexpected message. This time from an old neighbor who still lived near his parents. Just thought you should know, They talk about you sometimes, she wrote. Johnson stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Amy asked, "What does she mean?" He shrugged. "Probably telling people I abandoned them." When he replied politely, the neighbor clarified, "They say they don't understand why you won't visit." Johnson blinked slowly. "Of course they don't," he murmured. Amy shook her head. "People who avoid accountability always rewrite the story." Johnson whispered, "Exactly." Months passed and Johnson and Amy chose to start their own family. When their baby daughter was born, Johnson cried harder than he expected. As he held her, he whispered, "You'll never wonder if you matter." Amy brushed his cheek gently. "She already knows." They brought her home to the warm house they'd built, filled with love, stability, and the kind of care Johnson once wished for. Late that night, while rocking the baby to sleep, he thought about his parents. But instead of sadness, he felt determination. "This cycle ends here," he whispered. And for the first time he felt complete. One weekend, Amy's family visited to meet the baby. Her father held the little girl carefully and said, "You're doing an amazing job, son." Those words made something inside Johnson loosen. He hadn't realized how tense he'd stayed for years, always waiting for life to take something away. Amy's mother hugged him softly. "You're a wonderful father already." Johnson smiled, overwhelmed. That night, while feeding the baby, he told Amy, "You know what's wild? This is the first time I feel chosen." Amy kissed his forehead. "You are chosen and loved. Not for what you do but for who you are." A few months later, Josh checked in with an update. "Your parents' situation hasn't improved," he said gently. "They're still struggling." Johnson listened quietly. Josh continued, "Some relatives think you should help, but most say your parents made their choices." Johnson exhaled slowly. "I don't wish them harm," he said. "But I won't sacrifice my peace for people who only remembered me when they needed money." Josh nodded. "Fair enough. I just wanted to keep you informed." After the call, Amy asked, "How do you feel?" Johnson said, "Strangely, free. Their story doesn't control my life anymore." As their daughter grew, Johnson focused on being the father he never had. He read bedtime stories, attended doctor visits, and learned how to cook tiny meals that his daughter mashed more than she ate. One evening, while the baby giggled in her high chair, Amy said, "You're doing everything right." Johnson looked at the little girl's joyful face. "I'm giving her what I needed," he replied softly. Amy kissed his cheek. "And you're breaking the cycle." Johnson smiled. "Yeah. And it feels good." In that moment he realized healing didn't come from getting closure. It came from building something new. One afternoon, Johnson received a simple envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short note written in his mother's handwriting. "We miss you. Please call." No apology. No accountability. Just a plea for connection without effort. Johnson stared at it for a long moment. Amy asked, "What will you do?" He placed the note in a drawer. "Nothing," he said calmly. "If they want forgiveness, they need to acknowledge what they did. Until then, distance is safer." Amy nodded. "You get to choose who has access to your peace." Johnson whispered, "And I choose my family." Years continued rolling forward. Johnson excelled at work, earned another promotion, and built a life filled with stability and warmth. His daughter grew into a curious toddler who followed him everywhere, saying, "Daddy, look." He never missed a moment. One night, while tucking her into bed, she asked innocently, "Did you have a daddy too?" The question hit him unexpectedly. Johnson nodded. "Yes, I did." She blinked. "Was he nice like you?" Johnson swallowed. "Not always. But I learned how to be better." She hugged him tightly. "You're the best daddy." Johnson felt tears rise. "Thank you, sweetheart." When Johnson turned 40, Amy organized a surprise party. Friends, co-workers, and Amy's family filled the house. Laughter shook the walls and love filled every corner. During a toast, Amy said, "This man built himself from the ground up. And then he built a family with more love than he ever received." Everyone cheered. Johnson looked around at the faces. People who chose him, supported him, believed in him. For a moment he wondered if his parents ever imagined this version of him. Probably not. And that was fine. His life was richer than anything he'd left behind. Later that night, after the guests left and the house quieted, Johnson stepped into the backyard alone. The sky was clear, stars scattered like tiny reminders of how far he'd come. Amy joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thinking?" she asked. Johnson nodded. "About how everything started with them choosing a cruise over my graduation." Amy smiled gently. "And look where you ended up." Johnson exhaled deeply. "Yeah. I guess losing them wasn't losing at all. It was the beginning." He kissed her forehead and whispered, "My family isn't who I came from. It's who I built."